and I call this the role of the nurse because a lot of times, and I'm my dental hygienist, I'm sorry, but you guys aren't gonna be as involved in kind of an epidemic, right?
I'm fine with that.
Okay, but nurses are. Nurses are gonna see it early. And if they're really good and astute, they're gonna notice, in the last hour, I've seen 6 people with the same symptoms. And then they'll start talking to other people, and other people are gonna put the same thing. And then you're really there at the beginning, right? And so it's important to understand that. So remember, we, the human host, are susceptible to all kinds of different infectious agents. We are attacked on a daily basis, right? And we have to understand that really, when we have an infection, it's really the organism that has gotten into our body, has begun to grow, and has a constant supply of nutrients. And usually, the immune system takes care of business, but if for some reason we become overtaxed, then we get an infection, right? And so when we think about this, then really the pathogen is in the host, and we're gonna talk about what that means. When we look at diseases in medicine and infections, we can classify them different ways, right? We can classify them by the etiology, by the causation, right? So we can say that these people have salmonellosis, they have tuberculosis, they have, I don't know, some other infectious, they all have whooping cough, right? So we can do it by the etiology or by the cause, right? We can also talk about them by body system. We have an outbreak of enteritis, we have an outbreak of respiratory distress infections in infants, right? When have you heard that, right? Just recently, right? RSV is causing problems right now, right? But that's by body system, right? We can do it by longevity and severity, right? So a person might have a chronic infection, they might have an acute infection, right? Acute is right now, chronic is long term. Are you with me? So we can always talk about how they spread. Are they communicable? Are they non-communicable? Are they only spread through droplet nuclei? Or are they only spread by foodborne, by eating food? Are they only spread by drinking contaminated water? Can you breathe it in? What is the deal, right? Or we can talk about how they affect populations. And when we talk about how they affect populations, they can be sporadic. That means that there's an infection, and even if there's an infection of whooping cough in California, and one in North Carolina, and one in Wyoming, and one in McAllen, Texas, they're not related, they're sporadic, right? They just happen to pop up, okay? They can also be epidemic. When you say epidemic, it's an increase in the number of infections in a given population at a given time, right? It's short term, and then it comes back down to normal, right? But normal might be different, right? Because it goes up and it goes down. And every time it goes up and down, the numbers that are noise that are in the population all the time can increase, right? We see that with things like COVID, right? So with COVID, it came in waves, right? And every time a wave came, there were more numbers, so the waves were more frequent, right? And so, I don't know, we had like 5 waves of COVID before it's kind of calmed down, right? Endemic means that it is in the population, in an ethnicity or a geographical location, and it's there all the time.
What's the word? Endemic?
Endemic.
ENDEMIC?
It's coming. There's a slide for it, just for it.
Does
So
that
for
be like malaria in Africa?
yes, or diabetes in the Latino population. Okay? Cardiovascular heart disease in white women. Right? It's the number one killer in white women. Okay? I don't know anything about Germans, okay? I'm sorry. or Polish people, I don't know. Just something going on, I don't know. Right? What I do know is sometimes the Polish women can get a little grumpy with people real quick, like that. Okay.
Wow.
All right. And then the other one is, because she was mad at me last week. So, pandemic means that it's on every single continent except not Antarctica, because Antarctica is not sparsely populated, right? So we don't really count that, right? So besides COVID, do you know of any other infections that are pandemic right now?
Flu?
No? Not the
Pandemic
flu.
right now?
Right now.
Well,
What, no,
Um,
there are two of them.
is it
Athlete's foot or finger?
Not athlete's feet.
it'll be COVID?
Tuberculosis
What?
Wow.
and HIV/AIDS.
Are those pretty common at staying?
They have been pandemic for years.
TB?
Big killer in the world.
Another thing, I've had a lot of patients in Austin that have had tuberculosis.
We have a big population of TB positive individuals here because we have a fairly significant homeless population. Although they haven't been as prominent as they had been, right? I don't know if they're living in the woods now or something, right? I don't see them as much. I just don't see them as, I know that there's a big colony right, like in the woods by Pinnacle campus. There's a big colony up there, right? Hey, there's a Goodwill like down the street, and they come over there and they take all the furniture and they take them to their colony and they use the furniture in their colony.
So you said that the homeless population has a big tuberculosis. I never thought about that. I worked in a clinic, or volunteered in a clinic last year in downtown Austin. We had a lot of homeless people, and they told us to be like extremely careful, but they never told us.
Not only TB, but scabies, alcoholism, and not heroin, but what's the other one?
Meth?
Meth has always
Fentanyl?
been there, huh?
Fentanyl?
Well, so all those drugs are right there. So of course HIV is real big on that population also. The other generalization I can make is that a lot of prisoners have tuberculosis.
Just
That's a
quarters
water
and
droplet?
then-
Huh?
Or that's droplet? And then, so is there a vaccination for that?
Yes, it's called the BCG, but we don't use it in the States.
Why not? If we
How
have to
interesting that you asked that question. That's a good question.
And this is
Why-
for TB, the vaccine
Uh-huh.
for TB?
Why don't we use the tuberculosis vaccine in the States?
Because people have maybe deemed it dangerous for some reason, or they're fear around it.
Don't we just do that when it's a significant amount of people, like a significant
So
number of
our population of TB patients is not that significant when we talk about the entire population. That's one reason. The other reason is it would ruin our screen.
It would what?
It would ruin our screen. We use a skin test as a screen, and if you give people the vaccine, they'll always have antibodies, so they'll always test positive for the subdural test. And it's
So-
expensive to give everybody an X-ray.
So for for the tuberculosis in general, it's a issue of one, overcrowded areas, and two, like the general health of that population?
Yes, but also the organism. So the organism has to get out of the lungs and into the airways of people so that they can breathe it. And the easiest way to do that is to get a whole bunch of people in a confined area and have a person who's positive cough. Because it expels into the airways, people breathe it in.
Could it also be the general hygiene of the population?
Not necessarily. Yes,
So if we went down this little thing that we just went over and we were like etiology, that would be,
for tuberculosis?
that would be TB.
Mycobacterium tuberculosis, yeah.
Okay, and then you would say the body system is respiratory,
Mhm.
and then the longevity or severity would be
It's chronic.
chronic, because it lasts for like
Almost
ever.
nobody has an acute tuberculosis infection. It's chronic.
And it's water droplets spread.
It's droplet nuclei, not water droplets, droplet nuclei.
Yeah, and then, it is an endemic.
It's pandemic, but it's endemic to the homeless populations, to the incarcerated population.
And was there another category, or another categorization?
Epidemic, is that what it's called?
Endemic.
No, for the ethnicities and stuff.
Yeah,
Endemic.
epidemic.
Endemic.
And-
But I can't think of an ethnicity that is more prone to TB or that it has it all the time. I can't.
No, I thought you said there was a disease that was or like.
Diabetes in the Latino
a
population.
classification of diseases that was like towards certain ethnicities or regions.
Endemic,
Endemic, okay.
but not TB. Okay? Jim?
Maybe.
Yeah.
Does the term pandemic imply that it's lethal, or could it just
No.
be nothing?
It could just be that it's just everywhere. I mean, again, TB is chronic, COVID is acute, right? But it can cause long COVID, right? And then if you think of HIV/AIDS, it's chronic, but people can live a long time with it. As long as you have the resources to keep it at bay. Okay? So, if we think about this, what epidemiology is about, right? It's to really look at how infectious agents are distributed in the population. Now, epidemiology is about everything that affects humans. They look at dog bites, they look at tractor accidents, they look at motor vehicle accidents, they look at suicide, they look at everything. But I'm only interested in from an infectious disease perspective, okay? Secondly, is we identify the etiological agent and then we intervene to stop the spread, right? Epidemiologists will give up 100,000 individuals if they can save 1 million. See what I'm saying? So let's say that there's a major outbreak, I don't know, of something really bad, anthrax. Let's say there's a major outbreak of anthrax in Buda, Texas. Just gonna say that, right? Well, the epidemiologist might say, there's nothing we can do about that population. Let's sequester that population and not let them out. So they will form, a barrier that the people in Buda could not get out of Buda. But their idea is, we're gonna save the people in Driftwood, we're gonna save the people in Kyle, we're gonna save the people in San Marcos, in Creedmoor, in Bastrop, in Lockhart, in Austin, in Driftwood, in Dripping Springs, and in Wimberley, by sequestering that. Now, if you live, great, but if you die, we're just sorry, but we had to stop the spread. Because epidemiologists do not think about an individual, they think about the entire population. Okay? And so we have to think about how they think about the science. They're worried about the population, not a single individual. Right? Good? And I know that seems like it's a hard thing to think about, but the science behind it is real, right? Would you give up, if you had to make a decision and they said, you can save 1 million people, but you have to let potentially 100,000 go? Would you make that decision? I would not have a problem making that decision at all. Right? You save a lot of people. And some of the people might survive. So this is a very famous painting. It's called Death at the Water Pump. And you've seen it? Oh, somebody
Install
use
it
it?
in your office.
Okay, yeah, it's in my office, I love it. It really tells the story of how epidemiology became a science. So this is at the Broad Street Water Pump in London, where they were having a big outbreak of cholera. And what happened is a physician, Dr. Snow, took a map of the greater London area and he put a dot where all the cases of cholera were, and what he said was, what are all these have in common? Because that's what epidemiology do. They look at things and what is in common here? He said, well, there's this water pump in the middle of that grouping of people who were infected. So he went there, tested the water, tested positive for cholera, and he told the magistrate, this is the cause of the outbreak. And the magistrate wouldn't do anything, so legend has it that Dr. Snow went over and broke the water pump, broke the handle so nobody could use it, and cholera went away.
Question, could I take this picture and use it for my project? If I take it off your slide, do I need?
You don't, I mean, you can find it, it's a very famous painting. I call it Death at the Water Pump, it probably has some other fancy name. But I mean, you can find it on the web, it's everywhere. I mean, it tells a story, but if you think about it, epidemiology is a study of epidemics. What that really translates to, it's the study of how infections are distributed in a population. Okay? Second thing, right? It's really it's a study of comparisons. You have to know what is in the population generally. For instance, Isabella, What is an outbreak? 2 cases of measles in Austin, Texas in June, or 1,000 cases of influenza in Austin in July. Which one is an epidemic? We have about 1,000 cases of influenza in the summer months. We have a summer flu season, but we never have measles. And so measles is the epidemic, even though there's only 2 cases. Yep.
Is that why we continue to give the flu vaccine all the way until May?
So I don't know that, I've never known it to go that long.
Yeah, we usually don't have that many cases. Most cases stop in March.
Right.
They do go off in March, but I know that we give it until May.
I didn't know that. I mean,
It's
most
not
of, I get it so early, you know, I've already received my flu vaccine, but I have it scheduled on my calendar September 30th. I got it on the 14th of October because I was busy, but, you know, I've had it for a while. Now, my wife took it on the 30th of September. And so it's important for us to understand that. Okay? And then it is a study of intervention, right? So if we know how it's spreading, we can intervene. So think about COVID. What were the interventions that were done for COVID?
Mask.
Mask, what else?
Social distancing.
And what else? Vaccine, washing hands, right? You know, and then of course, we try to have people stay at home, right? But that didn't work out too good. We just we're American, right? And don't tell me what to do. Nobody wants to be told what to do in America, right? In the United States right now.
With your COVID parties and stuff.
What's that?
Your COVID parties.
Oh,
All over Mississippi.
yeah.
No masks.
Oh, it was terrible.
Just both.
Not only that, but on Lake Travis also, there was a big party out there, right? Crazy. And it was your age group
Oh,
that
yeah.
were the culprit.
I almost went to one.
Oh, look, Jen said it was me. Oh.
No, it's really interesting because I have a
Serious
conference in
FOMO.
Germany going on there, and they told me like horror stories, like they had a curfew, they weren't able to go outside after 9 p.m. Why are you outside? Well, you're walking your dog or you're on the way to work. That's it, right? My mom and my sister got a ticket, well, more so my mom, they got a ticket in the city because she lifted her mask down beneath her chin.
Oh my goodness.
And legitimately got a ticket. And then we have, you know, a big river and people want to kind of slow down a little bit and, you know, first nice like day, sun was out. People were gathering on the steps towards the water, all got tickets. So it's really interesting to see the dynamic, between partying here and getting in trouble for anything that you could potentially, do. It's really just.
So we take our citizen rights very seriously in this country. We don't want them to be taken away. We don't want perceived privileges to be taken away. I'm with that group. I don't really want to be told what to do. But when it comes to science, I understand the science, so I stayed home. Right? Except, I was the guy who went to HEB because my wife said, "You like to go there anyway." I'm like, "I'm done. I have no problem." I wanted to continue to teach in person, and ACC just shut it down.
Well, that was the thing, is a lot of people got, I guess, judged in a sense when they continued to live their normal life. But it's like,
Especially if they didn't
when
wear
you
a
have,
mask.
like, some people in my family and like my husband's family and friends or whatever, they kind of judged us, but you don't understand until you have kids. Like, I can't not go to the grocery store. I can't not bring my child. They're like, "Oh, you need to leave her at home." I can't not leave her, or I can't leave her at home. What's she gonna do? 2-year-old fend for herself, make her own mac and cheese, That's what made me mad. It's like, you can't leave your child.
Well, so when we judge, we typically don't take everything into consideration and we jump to conclusions right away. And that is part of the problem.
There was so much judging from both sides. Like, my family took it so
Yeah, it was
seriously.
terrible.
And then, like, I thought I was being sick. Like, I didn't do anything pretty much. And then it would be like, "Oh, we went and sat in the park and it's like, oh my gosh, you went out and it's like, or like friends wanting me to go to Florida and I'm like, I don't feel safe going to Florida, and then it's like, oh, you're just gonna stay home. It's like there was no win ever.
My wife and I would walk around the neighborhood and we wouldn't wear masks. There was
You're
no need to wear a mask
outside.
if you're walking in a neighborhood.
Yeah.
But my neighbors were like, you should be wearing a mask. I'm like, but you're over there and I'm over here. I'm like, the wind is blowing toward me. It's not gonna be a problem. But they didn't like that. So we just started walking at night when nobody else was around, except the coyotes and the deer, right? So.
The funniest thing that I saw was people driving in their cars with their masks.
They-
But like alone.
Yeah, I like that too.
I think it became such a habit at one point, but like that's something, I had a woman come up to me in Walmart, and my daughter was about a year and a half when all that was going on, and I had somebody come up to me in Walmart and tell me that it makes me like tear up thinking about it, tell me that my child was gonna die because she didn't have a
That's
mask on
not
and
right.
I wasn't protecting her. That's what I learned about COVID, is that people are freaking rude.
They're
and
mean. We're mean to each other.
Yeah.
Instead of
They're
being
so mean.
supportive of each other, we're just mean to each other.
It was more like a fend for yourself kind
Oh,
of thing.
and guys, and remember, COVID was a whip.
Mhm.
It was not a bad pandemic
Created so much chaos.
because we weren't ready. And
People freak out really
when we have the bad one,
H5N1.
it's gonna be bad.
Point.
It's drilled in my head.
It could've
Told
been
a lot of
worse.
people about.
It could have been a lot.
I remember when Italy was absolutely falling apart in the spring.
Okay, so Bob.
Oh, yeah.
So the one thing that I looked at all the time were the numbers of infections that were occurring in different cities. And you could almost predict who was being vaccinated by how many people were getting infections, right? Especially early on. Right? And
I mean, after the vaccination started?
Do you think there's a way to prevent that hysteria with another epidemic or pandemic?
it's gonna be worse. Because now people have been through a pandemic and they think that they know what to do now.
So you think it'll be more hysteria because of what happened with COVID?
If we get the bad one, people will think they're ready, they will act like they did with COVID, and it's not gonna be enough. And then people are gonna start dying. And there's gonna be so many people dying
60% death rate.
that people are gonna freak out. People will be fighting for bottles of water.
Why is it always the water?
Because that is the one thing you need to survive.
But you have a sink.
But they may not work.
Oh, it's
You
true.
going into that, my mother-in-law swears up and down there's gonna be an event soon. She
No.
follows that Q stuff and she's
No,
gonna be there.
no, well, okay. No, the reason it's not gonna work is there are gonna be too many people who are sick and nobody can go in to actually make sure that all the sanitation is happening correctly.
People have already forgotten, like, the firefighters, the cops, the paramedics, the nurses, the doctors, they were all out sick, you know? And the first time I went to the grocery store was I had to go to Fiesta because everything else was completely gone everywhere else, so I stood in line, go in there and did.
I'm surprised Fiesta still has stuff, right?
Yeah.
I walked into HEB thinking, oh, well, it's gonna be a normal day. I went in there and there were people like filling up their buggies with all this stuff. I'm like, what the hell? Is everybody going camping? What is going on?
The diapers, there was
Everything
no
was gone.
diapers.
The baby food.
There was no
Yeah,
water.
and the wiping.
There were no toilet. Who could have thought toilet paper, right?
Yeah.
I didn't think about that.
My mom.
Fine without toilet paper.
I did fine.
I'm like, toilet paper?
Invest in a, what is it, a bidet?
What?
Yeah, I just hop in the shower every time.
They say they're cleaner.
Yeah.
Anyway.
But Eric's right. We've already forgotten,
They have it, like,
right? Nobody's talking about COVID anymore. Because it's not a problem, right? So if you look at the number of cases that are right now in the population
My
of
family,
low, and the
my
number
family is
of
really big
deaths
about
are
wipes.
even
There's
lower.
like baby wipes, and they're, my family's really big about, in our house, about baby wipes, because they're always there. And like so much.
Oh, yeah, so that's just recent, right? 800 on a cruise ship and nobody died, right?
Wait, those people that were stranded on the
Oh wait,
river
there's
that-
a really good documentary about that called The Last Cruise.
No, this is-
No, this is just happening,
Oh,
like last week.
wait, what?
It's still very infectious.
Okay, look, I would not mind.
So COVID is still very contagious. It's just not killing people. I'll take that any day. I'll take that any day.
Why do we still treat it like it's killing people?
Why do we, what?
Why do we still treat it like it's killing people?
I don't know anybody who is.
Like the,
It still kills people.
Still in the commercial
But,
on
like-
TV.
But the
we still
deaths are
do,
way
like,
low.
the quarantining and stuff to an extent.
But it's not like it was.
For 2 weeks.
Tay, right now, the recommendations are, if you have COVID, you isolate for 5 days, and then you can go back to work or to school, but you have to wear a mask for 5 days.
My dad just had it, I thought it was gonna kill him. Because he is slightly demented and he didn't have the sense to be taking my Tylenol and stuff like that, he just couldn't put it together. And 2 days after he got over it, he forgot he had it. So I feel great.
Well, those are the kind of people that.
Yeah. You're like, I need that. Oh, it's scary though.
So it's gonna be out of our, it's gonna be history pretty quick, unless we have another outbreak.
Isn't China having one right now? They're trying to do zero COVID and those people are protesting.
They're already doing, I mean, they, I don't think they ever stopped.
Yep.
We can't do that in the States. There would be an uprising like you would not believe,
They like took their dogs away.
right?
What?
But,
They took their dogs
but
away.
they declared martial law.
So they don't-
They will shoot you in China if you break their rules. Yeah.
That documentary, it's called The Last Cruise. I'm a big documentary girl. It's actually very interesting because it talks about the cruise ship that got locked down and all these people were videotaping. So in like the first scene, everyone's like, happy on the cruise, dancing with each other. And then it just goes on and I was like waiting for a COVID documentary to come out. And if anyone is a doc nerd, it's called The Last Cruise.
Is it on Netflix?
I don't know what it's on, maybe Amazon Prime. It was free where I watched it. I would just try Googling it. It was pretty
What is
interesting. It's called The Last Cruise.
Somebody need a project, right?
Yeah.
So here is kind of what Snow did, right? He found out, well, because
HBO.
it's really just looking at what is in common. And so when you figure that out, then you can do something to stop the spread. If we think about RO, remember RO, we talked about it before, reproductive number. I want you to be able to use that in case I build a scenario, because you know how I like to build scenarios. And so you'd be able to talk about what that means. Good. So epidemic, Samantha, here are the definitions. Epidemic is a short-term increase in a given population over a specific period of time. An outbreak is the same thing as an epidemic. When you hear the word outbreak, it means an epidemic. Okay? Endemic means that it's in a group of people, in a geographical location, or in an ethnicity all the time. And so if you think about that, it's things like Ebola in Africa, especially West Africa, right? It's Lyme disease in Texas and rabies in Austin because of our bat population, right? So earlier today, there was a young lady who said, I really like squirrels and, can I touch them? I'm like, no, do not touch squirrels.
Was she a white girl?
Yeah, so I said it might be different on the Texas State campus where everybody feeds the squirrels and they kind of waddle up to you and just look at you like, feed me, are you with me?
They're kind of nasty.
Yeah, they are, but
They're full of
but
fleas.
usually squirrels, if you go outside and you see a squirrel and you go up to it, it will run and get on a tree and then it'll yell at you. It'll basically let you know that it is mad at you. Right? But so So-
Did you have to get
There was a
slaughtered?
squirrel on my dad's porch. He calls him Blackie. He's a black squirrel. They're native to like East Texas, and he feeds them white bread, which I've been trying to get him to stop doing that. They're massive, like rabbits. And so they will come up to you while you're just drinking your coffee, and they're aggressive. Like if you don't go get them a piece of bread, they're about to F you up. Crawl up your leg or like get on you. He didn't tell me. He just told me he like fed the squirrels sometimes. He would make a big deal, so I went to visit him after not going for a while. And I was like, oh my god, hi, hey, oh my god, you're coming up to me. Well, hey little guy. And he grabbed my finger and then was like, and I was like,
movie.
screamed so loud, and then I was crying. My dad was like laughing at me. He's like, are you crying over a squirrel bite? And I was like,
interesting because, again, if it's a wild squirrel and you go up to it, it's gonna run. But if you go up to the squirrel and all of a sudden it lays down belly up, it's not like a dog pet me on my belly. No, they don't act like that. So something's wrong with that squirrel, which brings up kind of the idea with the bats. Are you with me? So Taylor told me a really good story where one night she heard this kind of like,
You come to my house, they're back.
and there was a colony of bats getting started in her house. That is an amazing thing.
You wanna come
Taylor
get them?
wrote low-calorie energy drinks.
Coffee? Yeah.
Right.
I've already hit all this stuff, I'm like, this is too much.
So,
You can come get them if you want, they're back.
same thing with deer.
Oh, I was just gonna say in Oregon
So,
they're really
do
friendly.
not pet the deer. Do not feed the deer. They carry so many diseases. And if a deer lets you pet them, because usually if I go out to take the trash out and a deer sees me, he's like, and then if I get near him, he'll snort. Have you ever heard him snort? And then they go, right? That's a warning to all the other deer. There's this guy who's messing with us, right? But if a deer sits there and he's just laying there and he lets you come up to him and pet him, there's something wrong with him. And they carry rabies.
My grandpa owns about 400 acres in between Peninsula and El Dorado. And he has a high fence and keeps a bunch of active deer and white-tailed deer on the property. And over the weekend, last weekend I believe it was, he found a deer with wasting disease.
No, that's not good. You have to kill them all.
Yeah, that's what he noticed that this one particular one, it was a baby, or not a baby, but probably like a yearling. And they're hopeful, so the mom died a couple of months ago.
They have to kill them all.
And he has somebody coming out to, he's really rich. He has someone coming out to
Kill it.
do
Okay.
something, I don't remember, but.
They gotta kill them and burn them.
They said the access deer are fine because they're on a different part, but like all the white tails are not killed.
So where would a plague fall under?
Where what?
A plague.
A plague?
No plague.
Like they could have
Like
like
plague.
a leg.
A black?
Plague?
Like black,
Like a. Is it the black?
the black plague, right? Like would
They're
that be a
actually
pandemic?
It was pandemic.
Those are plagues, like I guess, how would those be
So
classified?
unfortunately, the word plague nowadays is used for any infectious disease. Plague to me is something different. When you say plague, it's Yersinia pestis, it's bubonic plague.
Like
That's the
death,
only real
kind
plague,
of, yeah.
Black Death. It's the only plague. Right? And we lost millions of people to bubonic plague. We'll talk about it when we talk about systemic infections in about a week and a half. Okay? And I'll give you the history. And then pandemic worldwide, right? So the two other things that are pandemic right now are HIV/AIDS and tuberculosis. If you want to see some scary stuff, go research about the flu of 1918. 50 million people died with that. If you go to an older cemetery, you'll find a section where between the years of 1917 to about 1921, a lot of deaths associated with flu, especially kids. So that flu was much like avian flu, and it did not discriminate just the elderly and the young, it killed everybody. 60% of the population died. Bad. But yet, we do not respect the flu. It is a killer. Okay?
If we do a project, can it be, like, if we have two flus, if we're talking about two different flus, is that okay?
Just one flu. Yeah. So here are some of the patterns, right? This is sporadic. And even if these are all whooping cough, they have nothing in common. It's just normal noise in the population, right? Here is an epidemic. Now these things can be different. That might be salmonella, that might be whooping cough, well, valley fever, that might be whooping cough, that might be salmonella, whatever. Right? These are just outbreaks, they're localized, right? They don't really have anything in common with each other. Now you start to see the endemic, right? So what is this pattern of? You know? What is it?
Southwest?
Hmm?
Is it the Southwest United States?
Valley fever, coccidioides, right? We talked about it before.
Mm-hmm.
And then pandemic, of course, are most of the continents, we don't really count Antarctica. Okay? So we talk about terms like morbidity and mortality. Morbidity are the number of cases in a given population, mortality, number of deaths. And they're usually given as rates, right? So for instance, the mortality of tuberculosis in Austin, Texas is 10 for every 100,000 individuals, right? So what did the person hear? How many cases? 10, that's all they heard, 10. Well, how many do we really have in Austin, Texas? If it's 10 for every 100,000 individuals, 100, because there's about 1 million people in Austin, Texas. So it's for every 100,000, how many 100,000 in a population? 10. So 10 times 10 is 100. First rule of epidemiology is never make the population scared. We talk in code. Okay? The other terms we use are, well, here, let's look at this. So, look here. What does this say is the number one sexually transmitted infectious disease?
HPV.
Do you believe that?
Yes.
A lot of people believe it. I don't. This was during a time when Gardasil was being debated, and the physicians became hypersensitive to it, and they were, here's the deal. My friend once told me, I don't know why you're in microbiology, because if you go looking for bugs, you're gonna find them. That is true. If you go looking for numbers, you're gonna find them, right? But the more numbers you have, the more you can make decisions. However, if you're gonna test everybody for HPV, you need to test everybody for everything else. And we weren't doing that. We were only looking at HPV. So the numbers got reported because it's a passive reporting system. And it looked like HPV was the number one sexually transmitted infection. It is not. What is the number one sexually transmitted infection in the United States?
Yeah.
Sure.
Chlamydia. Chlamydia. Okay?
So you're saying that is the number one right now?
Chlamydia?
Uh-huh.
Absolutely.
But chlamydia, they can do a test for that. HPV is over 100 strains of HPV.
Yeah, but we only test for the 2 that cause problems. Okay? Yep.
Can you also have like flare-ups almost of HPV where like you might be susceptible to it, but you don't actually have it, or like you can have it but it'll go away on its own?
If you test for it, Ellie, you're testing for the antibodies. So if you test
so no matter
positive,
what, it'll
it's
come
already
out.
been there. The other terms we use, Jen, are prevalence and incidence. So here's some terms that you hear all the time. Prevalence means the number of cases. Incidence means the number of new cases, and they're usually given as a whole number. So for instance, if I say, Eric, the prevalence of gonorrhea on UT is 50, but the incidence is 48, what am I saying?
Flare.
There's a flare-up. We're in the middle of an outbreak. Are you with me? There's a lot of love going on right now at UT. But if I say something, Jen, for instance, the prevalence of gonorrhea on the UT campus is 50, but the incidence is 1, what am I saying? There's only 1 new case, so there's all these cases going on, but we're not really in the middle of an epidemic. Okay? So
This is like a going rate.
we don't usually give these as a rate, it's usually a whole number, right? And so, again, first rule of epidemiology is don't get people excited, talk in code, right? And if you ever listen to Fauci or some of the other people talk, they talked in code, right? The normal person would not understand what they were saying, but somebody like me or anybody else who's been trained medically, they know what they're saying, right? I told my wife one time, I'm like, it's getting really bad out there. I said, we better just go to Bastrop and stay there. She goes, you're making a big thing out of nothing. I'm like, I don't think so. And then it hit like crazy. You could see it coming, right? In the fall of 2019, it was really big in China. And I told my class, this is gonna be a big thing. So we went away for Christmas, came back spring of 20, and it started to hit Italy and Europe. It was here already in California, in Oregon, and in New York, and then spring break was coming, and I told my students, I said, we're not coming back. I said, you're making a big deal. I said, I said, it's gonna explode on us, you watch. Because Mardi Gras just happened, and I'm like, oh my God, this is gonna be big, right? And sure enough, I told my boss, at the time it was Rick Fofi, I said, we need to meet about going online. I said, because we're not, he goes, you're making a big deal. I said, no, I said, it's spreading like crazy. And then that Friday, or that Thursday before we went to spring break, ACC announced that we were not gonna come back. We were going to, we were probably gonna be off 2 weeks for spring break so that we could transition to going online. We were ahead of everybody because I made them meet. So we built all this online stuff really quickly. Now, it wasn't the best, but it's what we could do very quickly. But I hated every moment of it because my students, I could not tell if they were learning or not. Or here, I can look you in the eye and I know if you're with me or you're not with me. But when you're online and people are like turned off because they're watching, you know, the reruns of The Bachelor while you're lecturing, you can't see what they're doing. And I have no idea what they're doing. I hated every minute of it.
It was terrible.
So when my boss said, they're thinking about coming back, sign me up. She goes, how many do you want to, I'll teach them all. You can, let me go back to campus. I want to go back. And so they let me come back. I was one of the first people to come back. I would rather be in class than anywhere else. I don't want to be online.
I don't think a lot of those should be offered online.
Well, there's a big push right now to do that. And I'm fighting it all the way, but it's going to happen. Students think that that's best for them. Students think that online is better. It is not. You don't learn it.
And then if you have children,
Oh my gosh.
I remember one time I was like at a university that I went to, you know how you do text motion?
Well, I'm saying for labs, no. Like, it sucked. I had to do all, like, a good majority of my chemistry labs online, which really sucked. I hated that because that's the best part of class.
Okay. So there are different ways to track things. We can look things over years. We can look things by numbers in states. We can look things and look at infectious disease over months, over every month, or we can look at it by age groups, right? As an interesting thing is occurring in the older population with gonorrhea and chlamydia. We're seeing a spike of infection with gonorrhea and chlamydia. What's going on, Isabella?
Nursing homes are getting it on.
That is correct, but why? Because they're lonely. They play bingo every Friday.
They love too.
Huh?
Old folks, they love
That's
too.
true. Well, what has allowed them to do that?
What?
What has allowed them to do that?
A lack of staff.
Viagra.
That's what I was gonna say.
I saw that in action when one of my favorite aunts ever was still alive. I would go and visit her every 2 weeks. She was in assisted living, and I would go and help her. And once I fixed all her stuff around her little apartment, she said, "Oh, can you help my friends?" She had a list like so and so. Taylor needed a new light bulb in her refrigerator, and so's fan was broken. Could you go and help? You know, there was all these things. So I would go over there, and everywhere I would go, Samantha, like I noticed one of the ladies was baking cookies. I said, "Oh, you're gonna have a little party?" She goes, "Oh, I have a new boyfriend. His name is Ralph. I'm making cookies for him." Okay, so I finished it. I go to the next place. I go to the next place, and she's making sandwiches. Oh I have a new friend named Ralph. He's coming over for lunch. I would go to and she's making a cake, a birthday cake, and I said, "Oh, whose birthday?" I have this really good friend named Ralph, and it's his birthday. So like 4 different ladies were making stuff for Ralph. Ralph was getting around. And later that day, I was going to the mailbox with my aunt, and this guy looked at her and said, "Hello, Eva, how are you?" I said, "Oh, he's interested in you." Viejo pendejo. He would go, his guy's name is Ralph, and he's a very bad man. He's like, so I met Ralph. My aunt didn't have anything to do with him because he knew what was going on.
Poor
Right?
lady.
Yeah.
She saw through.
So it's pretty interesting.
It's also the level of sexual rate in nursing homes is really high.
That is true also.
There's.
But
lots
it's
and
not
lots.
necessarily older people raping
It's-
older people.
No, it's the people that work there. I know there was a case in Luling where my husband's uncle was, and
It's, unfortunately,
he would,
it's like that with little kids too.
he would hit the men and then he would mess with the women that way.
Oh,
It's
they
really
all die.
sad.
Oh, they all get an incurable disease.
Don't say
Die.
your grandparents are.
So, all infections come in waves. You might have heard that COVID had waves, right? And we had, I think it was 5 different waves. Right? We may not be done with it yet, but it came in waves. And every time it comes in a wave, the amount of infections that are in the population go up just a little bit. Okay. So every time we have a wave, the amount of infection that stays in the population goes up a little bit. Okay? It's all about Cook's postulate when we're thinking about this. We're looking to see what the etiology is, right? If we can figure out the etiology, we can intervene. And so epidemiologists are gonna ask the strangest questions, right? But they're really interested in 3 things. Where were you, who were you with, and what time were you there? And now they'll ask all these other questions. I mean, it might be crazy, like you just don't think that why would they be asking this question? Like, for instance, have you changed your soap lately? Or anything like that, right? Because they're trying to figure out some commonality. What was it that caused this, right? Because if they figure out what is in common, then they can figure out what might be the transmission. And if they figure out what the transmission is, then they can intervene and stuff. Okay? So if we look then at exposure, and so here's a happy individual. You're not gonna see this because it's something I put together. But if you see a happy individual, and you get exposed to some infectious agent, from the time that they expose to the time they develop true clinical symptoms, that's the incubation period. There is a prodromal area, or what we call a preclinical state, and sometimes you don't know you have an infection or some other disease, but you go in for some reason and then they find evidence of it, right? So a good friend of mine who teaches here was going to have a hysterectomy, and she got worked up for it. And in the process of doing that, they took an x-ray and they found a spot on one of her kidneys. And when they worked it up, they found that it was cancer, and so they stopped anything for the hysterectomy and went in to resect that kidney. It saved her life.
Wow.
Right? Because it was only at stage 2.
That's why it's important to get checked.
So it saved her life. She's grateful, even though she only has one kidney. They were able to find it early.
I'd rather have one kidney and then die from cancer.
Hey, you know what? Whoever put us together thought of us. They gave us 2 kidneys, 2
But one
lungs,
heart.
2 testicles, 1 heart. Yeah. They gave us 2 eyes, 2 ears, right? 2 feet, all kinds of twosies, right? So hopefully, you can survive pretty easily, right? Well, you only have 1 liver, but that can regenerate. That's good, right? Oh, they thought about this. 1 heart, that's just it. You got 1 heart, right? 1 brain, that's it. They couldn't really find a way to put 2 brains in, yeah.
Maybe like lizards and gremlins.
We have 2
Yeah.
low, or.
Well, not a brain, but like an arm.
So if we think about the way things are transmitted, right, there's some different groups we put them in. Contact transmission, that could be direct, indirect, it could be droplet, nuclei, vehicle, food, water, air, or it could be vector-borne, right? And so biological, mechanical. And so we're interested in portals of exit. Remember, we know what portals of entry, how things get into the body, but we're also interested in portals of exit, how things leave, because really, things are gonna leave the body in very few ways, right? You can either cough it, you can sneeze it, you can defecate it, right? What other ways can things leave the body? Not very many other ways. If it's in your blood and you're bleeding, okay, that. But mostly it's gonna be respiratory or alimentary canal. That's it. So we can figure out how it leaves the body, then we can intervene and stuff, right? And so communicable, non-communicable. If I had leprosy and you're my best friend, Amy, would you hug me? Why not? But you can't get leprosy from a hug.
It's only spread through droplets.
No?
No?
Leprosy is spread by me having an open lesion and you having an open lesion, and the 2 come together.
That's what the king had
So you can't really pick up leprosy. You're more likely to pick up leprosy from a scratch of an armadillo than you are from somebody like me.
But then you wouldn't even know for 5 to 20 years.
Probably not. I've been scratched by many a dillo, and I still don't have
Wow.
leprosy.
How long ago?
50 years ago.
That was one of my papers, and I think it's like, they say the shortest one was a year, and then but it's usually 5 years, and the longest one was like 20 years.
It's really interesting. And the incubation period for leprosy can be up to 40 years. Because people in their 20s would go to the Peace Corps and then come back and live someplace in Minnesota or something like that. And then in their 50s or 60s develop leprosy. The only place they could have been exposed is when they were in the Corps. Pretty interesting. If I had Lyme disease and I told you, Amy, would you hug me? If you and I were best friends? No, why not?
Because that one's more convenient.
Because you don't want to get Lyme disease. But you can only get Lyme disease through blood. You're never going to get it.
It's still though.
Okay. She's just not hugging me no
I
matter
have a
what.
question. Something like leprosy, how long does that last outside of the body?
It can last a long time.
Like, so there is this camp or this colony
Lepers?
of lepers that was in Louisiana. We stopped in, oh, I couldn't even close, but I looked at it, and it was like a plantation that's just, the government started sending people there, or this group of lepers ended up there, and then the government took it over and it became a leper colony. And it's where like one of the doctors that figured out the cure for it, tested on people there. And I was just curious, like with all those patients in that one spot, is leprosy still in that area?
Yes.
Like, in
there's
that
a
specific
leper colony not too
plantation.
far away from here.
The ones I know about was the Carville in Louisiana, and then the one in Hawaii.
Yeah. There's one in Korea also. And now it's become, the one in Korea has become a big artisan place, right? But so.
Well, it's kind of like the one in Louisiana. After it broke up, it's just like a tourist attraction.
So I was given a lecture like this, and one of my students came over and she said, "I want you to know I'm a leper." I'm like, she goes, "Yeah, we live in a leper colony." Now they don't call it a leper colony; it's just a neighborhood, but they won't tell anybody. But there's a lot of people who have leprosy who live there because they support each other.
So there's still a stigma behind it?
Absolutely. Absolutely. When they told me that, then she invited me to a barbecue, and I told my wife, "You want to go to a barbecue?" And she goes, "Yeah." She goes, "How do you know this person?" I'm like, "Oh, well, she introduced herself. She was one of my students." She goes, "What do we know about her?" I said, "Well, she's a leper." My wife said, "Oh, okay." Because my wife is a scientist also, and
So
she
she
knows
knows.
you can't get leprosy from somebody who has leprosy unless you have an open wound. So we went, there are teachers, there are nurses, there's a physician, there's but they all have leprosy. But they
I
don't
feel
tell
like-
anybody,
I feel
except
like-
me, and they know that
Yeah.
I'm gonna keep their secret.
Like 9 times out of 10 with people, like somebody who has leprosy, they know how it spreads. They know how, the treatments and stuff like that and what they deal with on a daily basis. But like regular people don't, like they have an ignorance towards it. So that makes them get like a stigma around it.
There's a big stigma around leprosy.
And why is it still there? I don't understand that. With
Because
the
people don't
technology that we
Amy
have.
wouldn't- Amy's not gonna hug me, look at that.
I wouldn't hug in general.
Oh, okay.
She's like, it's not just that.
Okay. So this is one of my favorite pictures of all time. Look at that.
Very aggressive.
That's a very aggressive sneeze, right? Look at it.
I think most men
That's
have
amazing.
very aggressive.
But if we think about this, I want to make people understand that droplet nuclei and aerosols are a very easy way for things to spread. Fomites also. What's a fomite, Amy? Anything in animal. Okay? This can have some infectious agent, people pick it up, and, they can come down with the infectious agent.
What's a fomite?
Anything that is inanimate that can harbor an infectious agent.
Is there a word up there somewhere?
Fomite.
There it is.
Okay? What is wrong with this picture?
lot of
lotteries.
things.
For even for you, Jen, there's a lot wrong here in this picture? I think you, I would have thought you would have been.
Just laying on the floor.
Yeah, on the floor. The guy hasn't changed his shirt in probably 2 months.
Looks like it.
It's
He's also not wearing gloves.
But really, is there anything wrong with this?
The meat is on the floor.
But I know. But you're gonna cook the meat, right? So there's really nothing wrong. It's just how we look at it as Americans.
Well, there could be a fly in
When you go to Mexico, the markets have chickens that are just hanging there with flies all over them, and it reeks.
Yeah, but you cook it.
Yeah, I'm not eating that chicken.
I'm
I
just
mean,
saying that
I-
be careful when you're traveling to other countries. I was in England, and my wife and I were there having dinner, and there was another group of Texans that were there, and they were so rude to the people. I was embarrassed for them. But they would go, "Hey, come over!" I'm like, oh my God. So, you know, in Europe, it's very different. When you sit down at a table to have dinner, you're not done till you're done. They do not rush you out of there, right? It's your table until you're done. But these guys were in there and they were like making all kinds of noise and snapping their finger at the waitstaff. Oh my God. We tend to act very, no, there's a better word for it. Yeah. And we believe everybody should cater to us. Just gotta be careful. When you're in another country, you respect the individuals and follow their norms.
When people in
Do
other
not-
countries think Americans are already stupid, and those are the kind of people that make it worse.
We are.
But
Yeah.
it's because it's the rich people that travel the most, and they're snooty, a lot of them, and they make it so much worse for us.
It's
For
just,
me,
it's
they
just
were doing
ignorance.
So here is the wet market. And so the wet markets, if you think about it, you can come in when you're doing your shopping for groceries. You can come in and tell these ladies, "I like this chicken," and ask them how you want it to be filleted or dressed for you, and then you can come back and pick it up, right? But this is a good way for, again, there to be mixing of epitopes of human and chickens and whatever else they might have. Because in some countries, almost everything is a delicacy, and you can buy just about any animal in some markets. Okay? But even that doesn't preclude other things from actually bringing infectious agents into the United States, right? Here's the migratory patterns of some birds. So you might have H5N1 in this blue zone, and it mixes in with the green zone, and the green zone comes over and mixes in with this red zone, and then sure enough, we have avian flu in Texas. So
This
this
is
is.
a migratory bird,
Mhm.
and it started off with like little colonies of birds that would nest close together, and then those would get eaten by the bigger ones.
Or just interact with each other, yeah?
But I thought, from what I'm understanding from my research, it's transmissible to birds by fecal matter. And then
That is true.
And then they had a harbor seal breakout of H5N1, and they're trying to, from my understanding, know if that happens through fecal matter or from just being close together.
Yeah. So there's the harbor seals and other things are, they're a big problem right now on the West Coast,
So,
where the salmon are running. And the salmon populations are way down. The harbor seal and other types of mammals like that, their populations are way up. Because there was a law that was passed in the 1970s or so that protected them, you couldn't kill them. So now there are things that are out of balance, and they're afraid, like you were saying, that something can happen, and now we're gonna have a big problem, right?
But there wouldn't be a transfer of infection or virion, right? Is it you said virion at the very beginning of class, but I've never heard you refer to it
Right.
after that.
I just talk about viruses, yeah.
Okay. Well, can you use that interchangeably, virion and virus, when it comes to H5N1?
Yeah.
Okay, so there would not be a risk of transfer to the fish population because
No.
this is for mammals only.
Correct.
Okay.
Yep. Yes, sir?
So would it not be advisable to go diving with them? Not like specifically with them, but
The
they're,
seals?
yeah, they come around, they're friends.
Yeah.
They chill.
I don't know, I mean, I'm not gonna say don't go diving with them, I don't think that there's I think mostly what people are complaining about right now is there's just too many of them. And they're eating all the salmon. And not only that, but the fishermen, when they're catching the salmon, the seals and the sea lions attack the net, because that's where, and they take bites out of the salmon, now the salmon can be sold, but they're just going to waste, right? So, there's a big problem, and I don't know how we're gonna fix it.
Seals can be really aggressive too.
They are very
Like-
aggressive.
Like on the coast, they are.
They're more aggressive than the
huge.
squirrels.
I'm not that one on my back porch.
So, I wanna talk about carrier versus reservoir. So when we talk about reservoir, that can be living or non-living. Reservoirs are anything that can harbor an infectious agent and can help to spread.
You said living or non-living?
Mm-hmm, yeah. So I like to think about a reservoir that's living as an animal and a human who is spreading infection as a carrier. But it is not incorrect to say that a human is a reservoir. Okay, you can say that.
So we can't
You
say.
can. It's very commonly used that way. Okay? So some of the, like, here's mechanical vectors, right? The fly, and here's a biological one. But here are a whole bunch of vectors. I don't expect you to know all these organisms, I just want you to see them. But I do expect you to be able to differentiate between a mechanical and a biological vector in case I put something together in a scenario, because you know how I like to do that. Okay? And then zoonosis is a transfer of infectious agents from animals to humans. So zoonosis is singular, zoonoses, ES, is plural. I don't expect you to know all of these, but I do expect you to know that a zoonosis is an infection from an animal to a human. Okay? And then other types of non-living reservoirs could be water or soil, right? And so this is after one of the big hurricanes. And so nowadays all hurricanes are big. There's even the Category 2 storms can bring devastation nowadays. Did some of you all see how much of the shoreline got washed away in Florida? That is devastating.
I was told that a lot of Sanibel Island was gone, which is really sad because it was gorgeous. I went there this past summer.
But a lot of those people who had houses on the, what do you call that, on the ledge, whatever, looking out into the ocean, those houses are all gone. The sand underneath them got wiped away by the storm surge. And you can't rebuild that. I mean, the land that it was once on is now where the water is. So the property you once owned doesn't exist anymore. People lost everything.
It's crazy too.
I have a patient, his parents actually lived there. They had him pretty young. And I called them and I asked them how it was going, and they said basically everyone has to start all over again. It's not even like about the money, it's the fact that they lost their homes. Like, a lot of them are lucky and they have like children that they can go live with or other relatives, but some of them don't. And they have to sit there and wait for them to actually clear all of the debris everywhere and make sure that it's safe before they can even build a house again.
But some of that land just doesn't exist.
Yeah, like it's gone. They said some people's houses are completely gone. Like 3 houses and then the 4th one gone.
So
So
I'm
that was
predicting that we're gonna have an outbreak of disease in that area. And it's probably gonna be some encephalitis, right? Luckily for us, winter is coming, which might help us, but it doesn't get very cold in Florida.
Yes, everybody was just right to Game of Thrones.
Winter is coming.
Tell me, what does that affect? What does that disease affect?
So like
What's that?
Lynched it in 2 days.
All right, let's talk, I'm gonna go for a few more minutes. Let's talk about factors that can influence epidemics. So immunizations, the genetic background, right? Some of us are prone to have more infections than others. Some of us are prone to have oncogenes, which can cause us to have cancer, which can make us more likely to have infections because we're immunocompromised, right? The health of an individual, right?
It's something like an
That's what I was wondering.
immunocompromised,
Immunosuppressive.
and with an what the hell am I trying to say, Ellie?
An autoimmune disease?
Yeah, like
Yes,
an
an autoimmune disease.
Would that be
A
considered
stroke,
genetic
Jesus.
background?
Would that be genetic or health?
Genetic.
Genetic.
Okay. Health would be we're obese, we're diabetic, all those things.
What about health, like cancer, but a genetic form of it, would that be genetic or health?
Genetic.
Even if the person before you didn't have it?
Yeah, it's still genetic. It's oncogenic, right?
But he's tracking him.
That's
FBI
likely. I used to be on the FBI watch list because I had a license to buy infectious disease. When I was working for pharma, I could buy
So they don't want you to go to
infectious
other
disease.
countries.
Then I left and they didn't cancel my license, so I was walking around and had a license, and so I was being tracked.
Oh.
I said, we need to really cancel this.
Yeah.
And after 911, they got really, really strict about it. They took away my life. I mean, I couldn't buy anything. Right? I mean, like one day I was taking E. coli from here to HLC, and the officer pulled me over and said, "What do you have there?" I said, "This is just E. coli." He looked at me and said, "I need to call it in." I'm like, "Oh, sheesh, I'm in trouble now." But evidently
Drives
somebody
away.
said, you're not allowed to do that. And so now ACC's got a rule that you're not supposed to do that unless you have a permission.
Did you have it in like a cooler or something?
No, it was just on a rack on my front seat. I mean, it's E. coli, it's nothing.
You're like, do you want a shot, officer? Wait.
Culture, although Amy doesn't like to hug people, Latinos this weekend I went to Corpus and I ate a lot and I got hugged a lot, right? Because that's what we do, right? But not everybody's like that, and so you have to understand that. And I am less huggy now than I was before because people don't really see it as a sign of endearment. They see it as an advancement of some other nefarious way, So you just got to be real careful nowadays. Just hugging. Now, if I'm on the South Austin campus and my friend Laura Juarez sees me, she's gonna go, mi amigo, and she's gonna come over and give me a big old hug. But that's just the way she is, right? So it's very good. Religion also can play a role, right? Because there's some religious groups that believe that there should be no medical intervention at all. And that's fine. They're allowed to believe the way they are, right? And so there's not much we can do about that. However, I might have a different problem if my next door neighbor has a son who's really sick and has high fever and there's an infection raging, but they won't take him to the hospital. I might just take him to the hospital and then get in trouble later, right? Because I just don't think we should let people suffer. That's just me. Time of year, people always think, it's the winter because that's when we're inside, but actually it's the summer because that's when we're more apt to come in contact with infectious agents. We're out and about, right? And so we're more out and about and we're likely to come down come in contact with people who are.
Could it be
have
the
infection.
temperature as well?
Well, but the temperature, no. But the temperature just makes us want to go out and visit with people.
But not because it could cause the whatever it is. to be
Because
more
you're a
infectious.
constant body temperature. Right? It's rare that you're gonna go above 98.6. Okay? And then it's about the parasite or the pathogen itself, its ability to adhere to its host, its ability to get into the body, invasiveness, right? Its ability to mutate, right? Which organism is more likely to mutate, Tram?
The virus,
A virus, which one?
envelope.
Enveloped RNA virus, right, correct. Right? Its ability to exist as an intracellular parasite, if it's inside a cell, it's hiding from the immune system, it's hard to destroy. Right? So its ability to produce toxins, the number or the dose of an organism you come in contact with. So for things like salmonella, you need about 100,000 cells to get an infection, but for things like Shigella, only 10 cells. There's a reason Shigella did not show up in the lab. Right? Very few.
What'd you say about it?
Only 10 cells. Incubation period is variable for everybody. Everybody's got a different immunology and a different physiology. So what might cause only need 2 days to manifest in somebody might take a week to manifest in somebody else, and that's the same in vectorization.
Well, that picture be about the Black Plague.
Yep. We lost a lot of soldiers to plague also.
Well, that was a fight. They would take the dead bodies of their soldiers and fling them over
Early
the bodies.
on, yeah, they would catapult plague dead
What
dead
war
people.
was that?
It was, I don't know, I don't know. But they would dump them over the castles, and then all the people started dying, and they just go and take over. Right? Is that in Game of Thrones also?
No.
Wait, and
I have
so
no idea how it
Is that
is.
basically what people did with COVID patients too? They burned them because we.
But for a different reason,
They just didn't have anywhere to
they
put
just
them.
didn't have anywhere to put them.
Oh, I see.
So
But didn't we in the beginning, didn't we know if a dead body could transfer?
it would no. It's unlikely that you would get COVID from a dead person.
But weren't there cases where they didn't allow for the people to be around that patient?
But not when it wasn't, they just didn't allow them to get near them because of all the stuff that was going on. If a person died in a patient room, you would have to get through the hospital, which was there was a lot of COVID going on, and so they didn't want people in the hospital. So you could see them from the outside of the window, but you couldn't go into a hospital. Okay. So here are things that can weaken host defenses: old age and extreme youth, genetic defects in immunity or acquired defects in immunity like AIDS, surgery or organ transplants, mostly because you're going to be taking immunosuppressants, organic diseases such as cancer, liver malfunctions, and diabetes, chemotherapy, immunosuppressive drugs, physical and mental stress, right? All the stuff that you guys are going through at the end of the semester puts you under stress. I'm not going to mention anybody's name, but you know who you are. You get stressed out, and you're likely to get infections of the respiratory tract and the gastrointestinal tract. Those are the two that mostly get affected.
What would infection your gastrointestinal tract?
Norwalk, a norovirus, an enterovirus, all those that cause diarrhea. Okay? And it's self-limiting, it lasts a few days, you feel better.
I'm just curious what the popular ones were.
Those are the popular ones. And then other infections, right? So, people go into the hospital for influenza, but die of bacterial pneumonia because they picked it up nosocomial. Okay. So here's some of the strategies that we talked about, right? That some of the organisms have evolved with us, So the formation of a cyst, the formation of endospores, their ability to mutate, right? RNA envelope viruses. Their ability to exist as an intracellular parasite, chlamydia, rickettsia, there's a bunch of them, right? The development of a real complicated life cycle just about every single parasite that there is, and the formation of capsules, all of which allow these organisms a competitive advantage in a environment that they're in, which the most important environment that we're interested in is a human body. What we do to control epidemics is we can quarantine animals and plants. We don't really quarantine people unless it's absolutely necessary, especially not in the United States. We can destroy infected hosts, right, which Taylor was bringing up, the deer and wasting disease, like not to kill all those deer. We can destroy vectors, we can pasteurize, we treat water, be very happy on a daily basis. You live in a country that has really good infrastructure, so our water gets treated and it's not really dangerous to us.
How do we destroy vectors? Like for
Mosquitoes.
How do we do that?
We spray for them.
They'll spray neighborhoods, and a truck, like a control truck, or like log them.
You never seen it?
They do it in Austin, I believe.
If you're worried about mosquitoes in your backyard, you can use a dunk.
Are those the discs? Well, I was just wondering, cause like it's hard to destroy mosquitoes.
Harder.
As a person, right? For me, it would be hard to do that, but I guess there's chemicals that makes sense.
So the other thing that they're doing, which is pretty interesting, is they're using CRISPR to make the males so that they cannot breed. CRISPR, it's a molecular technique where we can edit the DNA of organisms.
So
And
we
make
artificially make,
artificially what?
oh, sorry, we artificially make males, so we have less.
Yes.
So they're dominated by males.
Okay. So immunization, I've talked that one to death, you know where I stand, I'm gonna just leave that alone. And then hand washing is really important. Hand washing is still better than hand sanitizer, but hand sanitizer is really effective against RNA envelope viruses. And then surveillance is really important. Yes?
I have a quick question over, I don't think I ever asked it over the hand sanitizer. Is it true that it destroys your gut? Have you ever heard that, like, if you use too much of it and then like the constant movement, it can transfer your food and stuff if it's on your hand, and they say the sanitizer can get in your stomach and kill your gut bacteria. Is that true?
It would become water before it got down there. It's just alcohol. No. I've never heard it. It's not true.
Some people believe that, like, you can't, that's why you don't put it on kids and stuff. I just don't believe in hand sanitizer, so I think I can wash your hands.
Well, I never
but-
did until COVID because it's really good, it's effective against COVID.
I just hate
But
how-
like when I would go to HEB, I'd see these people wiping down their buggies, I'm like, that's just a waste of time. Okay? So our surveillance is really passive. We rely on medical institutions to give this information to us and then we can look at it. We're way behind in actually looking at the data. So we're usually a year behind and that doesn't really help. We don't do it real time, it's just way too expensive. And then here's a picture of nurses that were part of a cohort. 10 of the individuals in this picture are my students. Maybe someday you'll send me a picture of you when you're in stage 4, level 4, and I'll put you in my presentation. And so, because this is not getting older. But nurses are really important because a lot of times they're gonna be at the front of an outbreak. They're gonna be working with patients and they're gonna see, hey, in the last hour, I've seen 6 patients with all the same symptoms. You start talking to other individuals and find that likewise, they've seen the same kind of things, and what you're seeing is the beginning of an outbreak, right? And so you might be involved in really intervening and stopping the spread of some of these infectious agents, so it's important to understand that. To me, the most important of all occupations and all careers is the nurse. Because you all not only give care to the patient, but a lot of times you're giving care to the patient's family. And you are also the repository for information between the patient and the physician, because the physician doesn't spend much time with the patient and not near as much time as you spend with them, right? So you're gonna have all the knowledge. So you all are very important. I want you to know the difference, yes ma'am?
Do you know Sarah McBride?
Mm-hmm.
She's the nurse practitioner in my building and she raved about your class. She said it was her favorite class.
She was a good one.
She's excellent.
She's a good one. I want you to know the difference between sign, symptom, and syndrome. A symptom is what? Something that is reported by the patient. A sign is something that's recorded by a healthcare professional. And a syndrome is a combination of signs and symptoms. You put them together and it helps you to diagnose what's going on with the patient. Okay? And then if we think about nosocomial infections, it's still a big deal. Even though hospitals are now keeping track, last time I saw, there was an estimate between 2 and 4 million cases of nosocomial infections in the United States alone. That's way too many. And so sometimes, a lot of times, if there are nosocomial infections, It's really about healthcare. It's really about the givers of care. And so, you know, to me, if one of your patients develops decubitus sores, it's on you. That is bad nursing. So be sure you understand what decubitus sores are so that you make sure that your patient doesn't develop them.
Pressure ulcers?
Okay, pressure sores, bed sores. Okay. And those things are really bad because they develop from the inside and come to the outside. Most lesions happen on the outside and can travel right down maybe to the second or third layer within the epidermal layer, or the dermal layers. But the pressure sores are deep tissue and they come out and they explode and it's really
It's
bad.
usually where like a bone is.
So I want you to understand universal precautions. Universal precautions is kind of really the following that everything you come in contact that is derived from a human is potentially infectious. And if you maintain that particular ideology, you're gonna run into less problems because you protect yourself. It scares me sometimes when I see practitioners of health not wearing gloves or glasses or something to protect themselves. You know, if you take blood and make a mistake, some of that blood can splash on your face, and that's a big problem if you're not wearing protection. It's really important that we understand that. And then, here's a whole bunch of different infectious diseases that are reportable. Some of them are reportable immediately. If there's a case of anthrax, you have to tell right away to the health authorities. But if it's influenza, you might report it in a couple of days. If it's a sexually transmitted infection, chlamydia, you might wait till the end of the week. You know, so there's just different ways to report things. We're only as good as our reporting systems are. Some institutions do a really good job of reporting. Some do not a very good job. And what we're doing is we're collecting this data and then we're using it to basically look at models that basically say where our problems are. Bless you. Okay? So I leave you with Peppy. Peppy was my dog, and we got him when he was 7 years old. He had heartworms, and so we treated him. He was too little to treat him with arsenic, like what's normally done. So we treated him with Benji's diet. You can look it up, and he was completely cured. However, the damage of the heartworms was done, and so when he was 14, he developed pulmonary emphysema, which led to end-stage renal disease, and he died because of multiple organ dysfunction syndrome.
You said
Right?
14 years old? Well, you still got little, right?
The little dogs like that come into 20.
Oh.
So he was a young pup when he died.
What's it called, Benji's diet?
Benji's diet.
Oh.
Okay. So every day at 3 o'clock, he would get on top of the couch and look out the window because he knew we were coming. And he was really happy when we got home, right? Ladies and gentle dude, that is the end of the